I used to believe every fear had a cause you could name, file, and forget. In my line of work, the unknown is just a temporary condition. You measure it. You interview it. You reduce it to a motive, a timeline, a fingerprint that refuses to wash off. Eventually, it becomes ordinary, another case in a cabinet, another headline that fades into old paper. That's what I told myself the first night Leo woke up screaming. It was 2:17 a.m., the kind of hour where the house feels like it's holding its breath. The hallway outside our bedroom was black, but not empty, never empty at night. It carried the low hum of the refrigerator, the faint click of heating pipes, and the soft wind tapping the siding as if someone was trying to get in politely. Mara was already sitting up, her hair a dark halo against the pillow. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. We both heard it. Leo's voice, raw, high, cracking in a way that didn't sound like a dream. It sounded like pain. I swung my feet onto the floor and went down the hall in socks, moving faster than I meant to. The closer I got to his room, the more the air changed. There was a smell, warm plastic and paper, like a night light overheating. The door was half open. Light spilled out in a narrow stripe, yellow and weak. Leo was upright in bed, both hands clenched in his blanket, like he was trying to keep something from pulling it away. His eyes were open too wide. The whites showed all around his irises. His chest rose and felt like he'd been running. "Buddy," I said softly. "Hey, it's Dad." His gaze snapped to mine like I'd yanked him by a cord. He wasn't seeing me at first. He was seeing through me. He whispered something I didn't catch. I stepped closer. The night light made the shadows in his room look thick, almost wet. The dinosaur decals on the wall leaned into the corners, their smiles warped by the angle. "What did you say?" Leo swallowed. His throat moved like he was pushing down a stone. "He's here," he said. Mara appeared behind me, her hand on my shoulder. Her nails dug in without realizing it. "Who's here, sweetie?" she asked, the practiced calm of a mother who's negotiated with monsters before. Leo's eyes flicked past me, toward the closet. I looked. The closet door was shut. The handle was still. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. But Leo's voice dropped to something older than 6. "The man," he said. "The one who doesn't have a face." I've interviewed enough traumatized kids to know how imagination works in the dark. It builds shapes out of laundry piles, turns coats into hanging bodies. You don't mock it. You don't confirm it. You redirect. "There's no one here," I said. I forced the words into a steady tone I used on victims and witnesses. "You had a bad dream." Leo shook his head hard. Tears clung to his lower lashes but didn't fall. He was too scared to let go of anything. "It wasn't a dream," he said. "He's waiting in the walls." Mara's grip tightened. I did what a rational man does to negotiate with the irrational. I checked. I opened the closet. Shirts and hoodies hung in a row like obedient bodies. I ran my hand along the back wall. Cold drywall. No gap, no draft. I got on my knees and looked under the bed. Dust bunnies, a missing sock, a plastic astronaut. Nothing else. When I stood up, Leo was watching me like a jury. "See?" I said. "Just your room." Leo stared at the closet opening and whispered, almost to himself. He moved. Mara made a small sound behind her teeth, fear disguised as impatience. "Okay," she said briskly. Bathroom break, a sip of water, and then back to sleep. She turned the bedside lamp brighter and went for his cup. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the heat of Leo's body through the blanket. "Tell me what you saw," I said, because that's what I always said. Leo's fingers worked at the seam of the pillowcase, twisting the fabric into a rope. He was standing there, he said, nodding toward the corner near the dresser. But he was also in the mirror. The mirror over the dresser was a cheap rectangle we'd bought to make the room feel bigger. Under the night light, it reflected a distorted version of us. My shoulders, Mara's hair, Leo's small face, ghostly and stretched. He smiled, Leo whispered, and then his face pinched like he was remembering a smell. But he didn't have teeth, just dark. Mara handed him water. Leo drank, but his eyes never left the mirror. I stayed until his breathing slowed, until Mara kissed his forehead and smoothed his hair back. We left the lamp on low and pulled the door mostly shut. In the hallway, Mara exhaled like she'd been underwater. "Night terrors," she said quickly. "Kids get them. My cousin did. Remember?" I nodded because that was the correct response. But when I returned to our bedroom, sleep didn't come back with me. It lingered in the hallway, reluctant. The next morning, Leo acted like nothing happened. He ate cereal, argued about shoes, asked if he could bring his space rock to school. The normalcy was so clean it felt staged. Mara relaxed in visible increments, like a spring easing. I poured coffee and checked my phone, already rearranging the day in my head. I was off duty, technically, a paperwork day. But the kind of work I do doesn't stop when you take the badge off. It follows you into your kitchen. It lives in your reactions. It trains you to notice what other people miss. When Leo sat down at the table after breakfast with a pack of crayons, I watched without meaning to. He didn't draw spaceships. He drew a building. At first glance, it looked like a child's version of a tower, tall and narrow. But the longer I stared, the more the lines made my skin tighten. It wasn't a tower. It was a lighthouse. Not the cheerful kind you see on postcards. This one leaned slightly, like it had a bad spine. He colored the sky above it a sickly gray-green. The waves were jagged black slashes. And at the bottom, near the base of the lighthouse, he drew a small square. A door. And in front of the door, he drew something else. A figure. Long arms. A round head. No face. Leo pressed the crayon hard enough to tear the paper in places. The figure looked like it was vibrating. "Hey, bud," I said carefully, "what's that?" He didn't look up. "It's where he goes," he said, as if I'd asked what the weather was. "Who goes?" Leo shrugged with one shoulder. "Mr. Holloway." The crayon in my hand, because I'd picked up a blue one without noticing, stopped moving. I didn't remember choosing it. I didn't remember deciding to join him at the table. "Holloway," I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. "That's a name." Leo nodded, still coloring. "He tells me." Mara was at the sink, rinsing a bowl. The water ran loud. She didn't hear. I tried again. "Where did you hear that name, Leo?" He finally looked up. His pupils were huge, making his eyes almost black. For a second, I felt the same chill I'd felt in interviews with witnesses who'd seen something they couldn't contain. In a song, Leo said. "What song?" He put the crayon down and began to hum. It was simple. 3 notes, then a drop. It carried a strange confidence, like he knew exactly how it was supposed to sound. The melody made my stomach turn, not because it was scary, but because it felt misplaced. Like someone had played the wrong soundtrack over my kitchen. He hummed it perfectly, without hesitation, without the usual childlike wobble. Mara turned off the water and glanced back. "What are you doing?" Leo smiled at her like he'd been caught being cute. "It's the lighthouse song," he said. Mara laughed in relief. "The lighthouse song. That's new." I swallowed. "Where did you learn it?" Leo's smile faded slightly, as if the question didn't match the game. "I didn't learn it," he said. "I remember it." The word remember landed heavier than it should have. Kids say odd things. They mimic adult phrases. They piece language together like Legos, making shapes that resemble meaning. Still, I asked, "Remember from where?" Leo looked toward the hallway that led to his room. His gaze went distant again, the way it had last night when he stared past me. "Before," he said quietly, "when I was in the water." Mara's laugh caught and died. "Honey, you've never been in the water like that," she said, trying to steer it back to safe ground. "You don't even like the deep end." Leo's jaw tightened. "I didn't like it," he said, and his voice sharpened into something brittle. It was cold, and he held my head, and the light kept turning. I felt my coffee sour in my throat. Mara stepped closer. Leo, that's a scary thought. Did you see something like that in a movie? At school? Leo shook his head violently. No, it's real. He pointed at his drawing so hard the paper crinkled. That's real. And he's not done. The room went quiet in a way that felt engineered. Even the refrigerator seemed to pause. Then Leo blinked, and it was like a curtain fell back into place. He reached for another crayon. Can I have a snack? He asked casually, as if he hadn't just described drowning. Mara and I exchanged a look over his head. Her face had a question in it. Do we call someone? A doctor? A therapist? My face had a different one. Where is he getting this? That afternoon, while Mara took Leo to a play date, I did what I always do when something doesn't fit. I went looking for the missing piece. I pulled out an old photo album from the top shelf of the closet. It was mostly family, birthdays, vacations, Mara and I at the pier downtown when we were still young enough to think the future was guaranteed. But in the back were a few things my father had left me. Clippings, yellowed photos, the remnants of his life before he died. My father had been a patrol officer before I joined the Bureau. He kept souvenirs of cases the way some men keep fishing lures. He never talked about them, but he never threw them away. I flipped through until I found a newspaper clipping taped to a page, a headline about an old disappearance from the mid-'80s. The photo was grainy. A girl's face, a coastline in the background, a lighthouse in the distance, barely visible like an afterthought. My pulse stuttered. It wasn't enough. Coincidences happen. Patterns form in any noise if you stare long enough. Still, my hand moved. I reached for my laptop and typed the name into the search bar without thinking. Holloway. There were plenty. Doctors, contractors, attorneys. Then, buried deeper, a result from an archived local paper. Holloway. Martin. Property dispute near Coastal Lighthouse, 1984. My cursor hovered. The house creaked. Somewhere upstairs, a door moved in the draft like a careful step. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself kids absorb names from everywhere. I told myself I was tired. But as the page loaded, I heard it, faint, distant, and wrong. 3 notes. Then a drop. Not from the laptop. Not from the TV. From upstairs, behind Leo's closed bedroom door. Leo was humming the Lighthouse song again, perfectly on pitch, like he'd been practicing it for 40 years. And for the first time since I became a father, I felt an instinct older than reason take the wheel. Not the instinct to protect him from the world. The instinct to protect the world from whatever had found its way into my son. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with my eyes open, counting the sounds of the house the way I used to count footsteps in a hallway during a warrant service. Pipes, wind, the distant bark of a dog. Every sound accounted for, every shadow explained, except the one I couldn't stop replaying in my head. When I was in the water, at 5:11 a.m., I gave up on pretending rest would come and slipped out of bed. Mara stirred but didn't wake. I left the house quietly, like I was the one sneaking back from somewhere I shouldn't have been. The air outside was sharp and metallic, dawn still undecided. I sat in my car with the engine off and pulled the article back up on my phone. Property dispute near Coastal Lighthouse, 1984. The name Martin Holloway appeared once, almost casually, buried in the 3rd paragraph. A local handyman, known to work seasonal jobs near the coast. No charges filed. No follow-up. The lighthouse mentioned wasn't a famous one. No gift shop. No postcards. Just a functional structure on a stretch of shoreline that had been half forgotten even when people still cared to forget things. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Coincidence, I told myself again. Children hear names. They invent narratives. The human brain is a pattern-hunting machine, especially when you're trained to look for danger. I drove to the station anyway. Not officially. Not logged. Just curiosity. The records room smelled like dust and burned coffee. I pulled files the way a surgeon opens drawers. Fast, precise, hoping not to find what he's looking for. Cold cases from the mid-'80s weren't digitized cleanly. You had to know how to ask for them. I did. 3 missing persons within a 10-mile radius of that lighthouse between 1982 and 1986. All unsolved. 2 adults. 1 child. I stopped breathing when I saw the dates. The child, female, age 7, vanished during a family trip. Last seen near the shoreline. A witness reported a man offering directions. The report mentioned a humming sound. The officer at the time had written it off as nerves. The photo attached to the file made my stomach drop. It wasn't Leo's face, but it could have been his eyes. I closed the folder harder than necessary and rubbed my palms together, grounding myself in the physical world. Paper, wood, fluorescent light. This was not evidence. This was my imagination misfiring under stress. I told myself that until my phone buzzed. Mara, Leo had another episode. Call me. I drove home too fast. When I burst through the front door, Mara was kneeling in the living room, holding Leo by the shoulders. He wasn't crying. He was shaking. His skin was clammy, his lips tinged faintly blue like he'd just come in from a cold. His eyes weren't unfocused this time. They were sharp, accusing. He says he can't breathe, Mara said, panic cracking her voice. But his lungs sound fine. I already called the pediatrician. Leo's head snapped toward me. No, he said hoarsely. Not like that. I crouched in front of him. Buddy, tell me what's wrong. His hands clawed into his shirt at the collar. It's heavy, he whispered. My chest is heavy. The water keeps pushing. Mara covered her mouth. I took Leo's wrist gently, feeling his pulse race under my fingers. You're safe, I said. You're here. You're breathing. Leo shook his head. I wasn't, he said. He put his hand here. He pressed 2 fingers against the base of his throat. So I couldn't scream. The words were wrong. Too specific. Too rehearsed for a child who'd never been hurt that way. Mara stood abruptly. That's it. We're seeing someone. Today. I didn't argue. The pediatrician found nothing. Normal vitals. Normal reflexes. Night terrors can manifest physically, she said gently. Children sometimes relive sensations. Relive. The word stuck with me. That afternoon, Leo sat at the coffee table with his crayons again. Mara hovered nearby, pretending to read. I watched from the kitchen, every muscle coiled. Leo drew another picture. This one wasn't a lighthouse. It was a room. Low ceiling. Concrete walls. A single exposed bulb hanging from a wire. In the corner, a drain, drawn with obsessive care, little lines radiating outward like cracks. I stepped closer. What's that place? Leo didn't answer right away. He shaded the corners darker, pressing the crayon until it snapped. It smells bad, he said finally, like metal and wet. My chest tightened. Basements smell like that. So do storm shelters. So do places water collects when it shouldn't. Is it in a lighthouse? I asked. Leo looked up, startled. How do you know about the lighthouse? Mara's head snapped toward me. I opened my mouth, closed it. You drew it, I said. The other day. Leo studied my face, searching for something. Permission, maybe, or recognition. It's under it, he said. But not under like downstairs. Under like buried. I felt the room tilt slightly. Leo, Mara said softly, where are you seeing these things? He frowned. I don't see them, he said. I feel them. He tapped his temple. They're loud in here when it's dark. That night, he refused to sleep alone. We dragged a mattress into our room and let him curl up between us. His body radiated heat like he'd run a fever, but the thermometer said otherwise. Around midnight, he began to hum. Mara stirred. I held up a finger, my heart hammering. The melody drifted out of him like a confession. Slow, deliberate. I recognized it now. Not consciously, muscle memory recognized it. The part of my brain that catalogs details for later use. I slipped out of bed and stood in the hallway with my phone, recording. The tune matched a song I'd heard once before, faint and distorted, coming from an old cassette in an evidence box. A local jingle, played on late-night radio in the early 80s, pulled after complaints. I found a recording online at 12:47 a.m. Leo hummed every note perfectly. The next morning, I stopped pretending this was normal. I took a day off I didn't have and drove back to the station, this time logging in. I pulled everything tied to Martin Holloway. Not just reports, utility records, employment, property maps. There was a gap, 10 years where he vanished from official paperwork. No address, no taxes. Then he reappeared, older, quieter, living 2 counties inland. Alive, free. I printed a photograph from a DMV archive and brought it home folded in my pocket like contraband. That evening, I sat with Leo on the couch and pulled out the photo without ceremony. "Do you know this man?" I asked. Leo's reaction was immediate. He screamed, not a child's tantrum scream, a raw, tearing sound that ripped through the room and lodged itself in my chest. He scrambled backward off the couch, hitting the floor hard, his eyes locked on the image like it could move. "That's him," he cried. "That's the man without the face." Mara rushed in, grabbing Leo, shaking. "Why would you show him that?" she yelled at me, fear turning to anger. Leo buried his face in her shoulder, sobbing. "He didn't look like that before," he gasped. "He was younger. His hair was darker. But that's him. He whistles when he thinks." My blood went cold. I looked at the photo again. Holloway's lips were pursed slightly, as if caught mid-whistle. I hadn't noticed before. That night, after Leo finally fell asleep, deep, exhausted sleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table and spread out everything I'd gathered. Maps, photos, timelines. They lined up too cleanly. The lighthouse, the basement, the years, the song. This wasn't memory bleed through. This wasn't suggestion. This was continuity. At 3:06 a.m., I made the decision I'd been avoiding since the first scream. I would take Leo to the place. Not to prove anything, not to solve a case, but because somewhere in the part of my brain that never sleeps, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Leo wasn't remembering a story. He was remembering how it ended. And whatever was buried out there had waited decades to be found. It wasn't done yet. We didn't tell anyone where we were going. That was the first mistake. The second was believing daylight would make it safer. The drive took 3 hours, north along a stretch of highway that slowly forgot it was meant for people. Cell service thinned. The radio gave up halfway through a song and never came back. Leo sat in the back seat, silent, his forehead pressed to the glass like he was watching something we couldn't see. Mara kept glancing at me. Not angry, not scared. Worse, resigned. "You're sure about this?" she asked finally. "No, but certainty wasn't the currency anymore." "He has to go," I said. That wasn't entirely true. Leo hadn't asked. He'd said, "It's still there." The lighthouse appeared around a bend like a mistake in the landscape. It was taller than I expected, leaner. Its white paint had peeled into long vertical scars, exposing gray concrete beneath. The surrounding land was dead grass and rock, flattened by decades of wind. No fancies, no signs, no warnings, just absence. I parked near what used to be a maintenance road. The tires crunched too loud. Even the sound felt unwelcome. Leo unbuckled himself. "Wait," Mara said, reaching back. "Let us." "I know," Leo said. He opened the door. The wind hit us immediately, cold and sharp, carrying salt and something older, rot, maybe. The lighthouse didn't hum with machinery anymore, but it wasn't silent either. It creaked faintly, a slow, arthritic sound like something shifting its weight. Leo started walking, not running, not hesitating, He walked like someone returning somewhere they had once lived. "Leo," I called. "Stay where I can see you." He nodded without turning. As we got closer, I noticed things my brain hadn't registered in the photos. The ground dipped unnaturally near the base, as if the earth had settled unevenly. There were stones half buried in a loose semicircle. "Old, deliberate," Mara whispered. "I don't like this." I didn't answer. Leo stopped near the backside of the structure, where the wind hit less hard. He stared at the wall, then knelt and pressed his palm flat against the concrete. "Here," he said. "Hear what?" I asked. His voice dropped. "This is where it hurts." Mara grabbed my arm. "We're done. We came. We saw it. We're leaving." Leo shook his head slowly. "Not yet." He stood and walked to a patch of ground a few feet away, near where the old maintenance shed used to be. Only its foundation remained, a rectangle of cracked cement choked by weeds. He stopped at one corner. "Under there," he said. I crouched beside him. "What under there, Leo?" He didn't look at me. The quiet. I felt it then, that crawling sensation at the base of my skull, the one I'd learned to trust on scenes where something wasn't right. The air felt compressed, wrongly still. "Dad," Leo said softly. "He put me there because he thought no one would dig." Mara made a sound like a sob. I stood up. "We're calling this in," I said, pulling my phone out. No signal. Of course. I walked a few steps away, scanning the horizon, lifting the phone uselessly. Nothing. Not even emergency. When I turned back, Leo had knelt again. "No," I said sharply. "Don't touch anything." His hand froze inches above the ground. Then he recoiled violently, like he'd been burned. "He's here," Leo whispered. The words landed heavy. "Who?" Mara asked. Leo pointed, not at the lighthouse, not at the ground, at the trees. At first I saw nothing. Then movement, subtle, deliberate, a shape between trunks. Someone standing very still, trusting distance and camouflage. Watching. Every muscle in my body snapped tight. "Mara," I said quietly, "get behind me." Now. She didn't ask why. I took one step forward and raised my voice. "This is private property. You need to show yourself." Silence. Then a man stepped into the open. He was older than the photo. Thinner. His back curved slightly, like he'd spent years folding himself smaller. He wore a dark jacket despite the wind, zipped up to his throat. His face was ordinary. Too ordinary. But his eyes never blinked. "I thought someone might come back here one day," he said. His voice was dry, almost conversational. "Didn't expect a family outing." My hand hovered near my waistband out of habit. "No weapon, just memory." "Who are you?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Caretaker," he said. "Of sorts." Leo whimpered behind me. The man's gaze flicked down, then snapped back up sharp. He stared at Leo like he'd seen a ghost. "You shouldn't have brought him," the man said. My blood roared in my ears. "You know him?" The man swallowed. For the first time, something like fear cracked through his composure. "No," he said too quickly. "But I know that look." Leo stepped out from behind me. "Mr. Holloway," he said. The man froze. Absolutely still. The wind seemed to pause around us, like it was listening. "You shouldn't remember," Holloway whispered. Leo's face twisted, not in fear, but in something deeper. Recognition. Old pain. "You pressed my head," Leo said calmly. "Right here." He touched his own throat. "Because I kept singing." Holloway staggered back a step. "You were quiet after," Leo continued. "But you were still angry. You buried me before the light finished turning." Mara collapsed her knees. I felt something break loose inside my chest. Holloway's eyes darted around, calculating. "You don't understand," he said hoarsely. He's not." Leo interrupted him. "You counted," he said. "You always counted. 3 turns of the shovel. Then you rested." Holloway screamed. Not loud, high. "Animal." He lunged. I tackled him without thinking. We hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the air from both of us. He was weaker than I expected, but desperation makes up for muscle. His hands clawed at my face, my throat. "I didn't mean to," he shrieked. "It was an accident." I pinned his arms with my knees, forcing his face into the dirt. Mara was shouting. Leo was crying. And then Leo's voice cut through it all. "Dad," he said urgently. "He hit it wrong." I looked up. "What?" "The place," Leo said, pointing again. He was shaking. He'd buried it too shallow. Sirens broke the horizon then, faint but growing. Someone must have seen us park, or heard Holloway scream. I held him down until the police arrived, until hands pulled him away, until cold metal clicked around his wrists. As I let him past Leo, Holloway twisted his head and stared. "You don't belong here," he spat. "You're supposed to be gone." Leo met his gaze steadily. "I was," he said. The ground was open that evening. Beneath the foundation, just where Leo had pointed, they found it. The truth. And when the first shovel struck something solid, Leo finally let out a long, shuddering breath, like he'd been holding it for 40 years. They worked through the night. Floodlights turned the dead grass silver and hard, casting shadows that stretched too long across the ground. The lighthouse loomed behind the scene like a silent witness finally forced to testify. Police tape fluttered uselessly in the wind. Cameras stayed back. This wasn't spectacle yet. It was reverence. I stood with Mara and Leo at the edge of the cordon, wrapped in a borrowed jacket that smelled like someone else's cigarettes. Mara held Leo tightly, her chin resting on the top of his head, as if she could anchor him to the present by force alone. Leo didn't look away. The first thing they uncovered wasn't bone. It was fabric, a scrap of cloth, waterlogged once, now stiff and brown with age. One of the officers cursed quietly under his breath. Another crossed himself without thinking. They slowed after that. Hands replaced shovels. Dirt was brushed away grain by grain. When the skull emerged, I felt Mara's knees buckle. I caught her just in time. Leo inhaled sharply. "There," he whispered. "That's where it stopped hurting." I looked at my son, 6 years old, trembling, eyes glassy but clear, and felt something inside me tear cleanly in two. The part of me that needed the world to make sense fought desperately against the part that already knew the truth. The remains were small, too small. The medical examiner arrived before dawn. The body had been buried hastily, just as Leo said. No prupedabad. No care taken. The killer had been afraid. Rushed. Certain no one would come looking. He was wrong. As the sun crept up over the horizon, painting the sky in dull pinks and sickly oranges, the evidence stacked itself neatly into a shape I recognized too well. Cause of death: asphyxiation. Secondary: drowning. Estimated time of burial: mid-1980s. The cold case child, the one with eyes like Leo's. I sat on the hood of a squad car while Holloway was led away, wrapped in a blanket that did nothing to make him look human again. He stared straight ahead, lips moving silently, whistling. I wanted to feel satisfaction, closure, victory. Instead, I felt hollow, because justice doesn't erase what's already happened. It only names it. By the time we got home, Leo could barely keep his eyes open. He fell asleep in the car, his head lolling against the window, mouth slightly open. For the first time in weeks, his face was peaceful. No tensión, no fear, just sleep, the kind that doesn't fight back. That night, he didn't hum. He didn't wake screaming. He didn't draw. He slept for 11 straight hours, breathing slow and deep, like someone who had finally been allowed to stop running. Mara and I sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, neither of us touching the cold mugs in front of us. "So what now?" she asked quietly. I had no answer that would help. The investigation moved fast after that, faster than I was comfortable with. Confessions came easily once the body was found. Holloway talked in fragments, Denial collapsing into justification, justification into something like relief. He'd killed 3, 2 adults, 1 child. The child had sung. That detail didn't make the official report. Some things don't belong on paper. The media called it a miracle, a psychic child, a once-in-a-generation phenomenon. They wanted interviews, photos, sound bites. We declined all of it. I took a leave of absence I wasn't sure I'd return from. And Leo? Leo changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Subtly. He stopped drawing dark places. Started drawing trees. Dogs. Rockets. He asked questions again, the normal ones. Why the moon follows the car. Why adults lie about vegetables. But sometimes in the quiet moments between questions, he would pause. Like he was listening for something that wasn't there anymore. One evening, weeks later, I found him standing in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at his own reflection. "Hey," I said gently. "Everything okay?" He nodded. "I think so. What are you thinking about?" He considered the question seriously. "It's quieter in my head," he said, "like when a song ends." My throat tightened. "Do you miss it?" Leo shook his head. "No. I didn't like that song." I knelt beside him. "Do you remember what happened?" He frowned. "Not really. It's fuzzy, like a dream you had when you were sick." Relief washed through me so strong it made my hand shake. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "But I remember you." I froze. "Me?" He nodded. "You found me." I pulled him into my arms and held him longer than necessary. Months passed. The lighthouse was fenced off, slated for demolition. Progress, they called it. Erasure with permission. The case closed officially. Holloway received life without parole. No appeals. Justice by the book. But I couldn't go back to the way things were. Once you've looked into the dark and realized it can look back through your own child's eyes, the world rearranges itself. Corners seem deeper. Silence grows teeth. I stopped working cold cases, not because I couldn't handle them, but because I no longer believe the past stays buried just because we want it to. Some nights, I dream of water, not drowning, just floating, a slow-turning light above me. 3 beats, then rest. I wake up sweating, heart pounding, the echo of a song on my tongue that I don't remember learning. And sometimes, very rarely, I hear Leo humming softly in his room. Not the lighthouse song. Something new. Something his. I don't stop it, because I understand now that memory isn't bound by time the way we are. That trauma can echo forward as easily as it bleeds back. And that some truths wait patiently for a voice strong enough or small enough to carry them home. Leo sleeps peacefully now, but I don't. I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, knowing with a certainty that terrifies me more than any unsolved case ever did. The past is never finished. It's only quiet, waiting for someone to remember how it ends.